David Rodriguez was bone-tired as he climbed the stairs to his third-floor apartment. His construction boots felt like they weighed 100 pounds each, and his back ached from 10 hours of laying concrete. All he wanted was to heat up some leftover pizza, help his son Tommy with homework, and maybe catch a few minutes of the game before falling asleep. But life had other plans. There, curled up in a ball next to his apartment door, was a teenage girl. She looked maybe 16 or 17 with long dark hair that hadn't seen a brush in days. Her clothes were expensive looking. A designer jacket and jeans that probably cost more than David made in a week. But they were dirty and wrinkled like she'd been sleeping in them. David stopped walking. His first thought was that she might be dangerous, maybe on drugs or something. You heard stories about kids these days. But then she looked up at him with these huge brown eyes and he saw something that made his chest tight. She wasn't dangerous. She was scared. "Hey there," he said softly, the way he talked to Tommy when he had nightmares. "You okay?" The girl scrambled to her feet, clutching a beat-up backpack against her chest. For a second, David thought she might run. Instead, she just stood there looking lost. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice was shaky. "I know I shouldn't be here. I needed somewhere to sit for a minute." David noticed she talked different than most kids from the neighborhood. Proper, like she went to one of those fancy private schools. But here she was, obviously homeless and alone. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily," she said after a pause, like she had to think about it. "Okay, Lily, I'm David. You hungry?" She nodded quickly, then seemed embarrassed about it. "I haven't eaten since yesterday morning." That decided it for David. He'd been hungry before, back when Tommy was little and money was even tighter than it was now. No kid should have to feel that empty, gnawing pain in their stomach. "Come on," he said, unlocking his door. "Let's get you something to eat." Lily hesitated. "I don't want to cause trouble. I can find somewhere else to go." "Where?" David asked, and she didn't have an answer for that. The apartment was small and definitely not fancy. The couch had a tear in it that David kept meaning to fix, and the coffee table was actually just a cardboard box covered with a towel. But it was clean and warm, and right now that seemed like enough. "Dad?" Tommy's voice came from the kitchen. He was 9 years old with his father's dark hair and his mother's curious eyes. "Who's that?" "This is Lily," David said. "She's going to have dinner with us tonight." Tommy looked at Lily with the frank stare that only kids can get away with. "Are you homeless?" "Tommy," David warned, but Lily actually smiled a little. "Yeah, I guess I am," she said. "That sucks," Tommy said matter-of-factly. "Dad, can we make extra mac and cheese?" That's how Lily ended up sitting at their kitchen table, eating boxed macaroni and cheese like it was the best meal she'd ever had. David watched her try not to eat too fast, but he could tell she was starving. He made her a second bowl without asking. "So where are you from?" David asked carefully. Lily's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Around," she said. "I move a lot." David could tell she didn't want to talk about it, so he didn't push. Instead, he listened as Tommy chattered about his day at school, about how his teacher, Mrs. Chen, had let them do experiments with vinegar and baking soda. "That's chemistry," Lily said suddenly. "The reaction produces carbon dioxide gas, which is why it bubbles up." Tommy's eyes went wide. "Really? How do you know that?" Lily looked surprised, like she hadn't meant to say anything. I read a lot." After dinner, Tommy spread his homework out on the table. David was about to help him when Lily spoke up. "I could help if you want. I'm pretty good at math." Tommy's homework was multiplication, which David remembered being tough at that age. But Lily explained it in a way that made it sound simple, drawing little pictures and using examples about splitting up cookies. Tommy got it right away. "Wow," Tommy said. "You're like a teacher, but not boring." Lily laughed, and it was the first time she'd seemed really relaxed since David found her. She looked like a different person when she smiled. Younger, happier. As the evening went on, David noticed things about Lily that didn't quite add up. She knew a lot about stuff most teenagers wouldn't care about, like how the stock market worked and why gas prices went up and down. When she helped clean up after dinner, she moved around the kitchen like she was used to fancy equipment, not their basic setup. But the biggest thing David noticed was how she looked at Tommy. There was something hungry in her eyes, but not for food. She watched him like she'd never seen a kid just being a kid before. "I should go," Lily said when Tommy went to brush his teeth. "You've been really kind, but I don't want to impose. Where are you going to sleep?" David asked. She shrugged. I'll find somewhere. David thought about his own son alone on the street somewhere. The idea made him sick. Look, he said. The couch pulls out into a bed. It's not much, but it's warm and safe. You can stay tonight, and tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. Lily's eyes filled with tears, which she quickly wiped away. Why are you being so nice to me? You don't even know me. David thought about that. When my wife died 3 years ago, a lot of people helped us when we needed it. People who didn't have to, but did anyway. Maybe this is my turn to help someone else. That night, David lay in bed listening to the sounds of his apartment. Tommy's soft breathing from the next room. The hum of the refrigerator. And from the living room, very quietly, someone crying. He almost got up to check on Lily, but something told him she needed this moment to herself. Tomorrow he'd ask more questions, try to figure out how to help her properly. Tonight it was enough that she was safe and fed. What David didn't know was that in the living room, Lily was staring at the ceiling and thinking about her real life. About the mansion she'd run away from, the father who controlled every minute of her day, and the fortune that was supposed to be hers someday. She thought about the bodyguards who were probably still looking for her, and the life of luxury that felt more like a prison. For the first time in months, though she felt something she'd almost forgotten existed, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could trust someone again. In his bedroom, David was making plans. He'd call his sister in the morning, see if she knew anything about resources for homeless kids. Maybe there were programs that could help Lily get back on her feet without throwing her into the system. He had no idea that he'd just welcomed a billionaire's daughter into his home. All he knew was that a kid needed help, and he was going to do everything he could to give it to her. 3 weeks had passed since David found Lily sleeping outside his door. What started as one night of kindness had somehow become a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Lily had insisted on earning her keep, and boy, did she ever. David came home from work to find his apartment cleaner than it had been since his wife died. Not just tidy, actually clean. The windows sparkled, the floors were mopped, and somehow Lily had managed to fix that broken cabinet door that had been hanging crooked for months. How did you learn to do that? David asked, pointing at the cabinet. Lily shrugged, not meeting his eyes. YouTube videos. You can learn anything online these days. But David was starting to notice that Lily seemed to know things before she looked them up. Little things like how to get red wine stains out of carpet when Tommy spilled grape juice, or how to negotiate with the landlord when he came around talking about raising the rent. The biggest change was in the kitchen. Lily cooked like she'd been trained by professionals. She took their basic ingredients and turned them into meals that made David's mouth water. Last night she'd made something with chicken that tasted like it came from a fancy restaurant. Where did you learn to cook like this? Tommy asked, sauce from the amazing pasta dish covering his chin. I had a friend whose family had a chef, Lily said carefully. I used to watch her cook. David noticed how she always did that, started to say something, then changed her story. He was getting a collection of these half-truths. Lily had gone to private school, but not anymore. Her family had money, but not really. She'd lived in different places, but couldn't name any of them specifically. The weird thing was, David was starting not to care about the lies. Whatever Lily was running from, she was clearly better off here than wherever she'd been. She laughed now. She helped Tommy with homework and seemed genuinely happy when he got good grades. She'd even started watching cartoons with him on Saturday mornings, something David suspected she'd never done before. But there were still moments that made David wonder what he'd gotten himself into. Like yesterday morning, when Lily's phone rang while she was making breakfast. She'd answered it without thinking, and David heard her speaking rapid Italian, not just a few words, full sentences like she was completely fluent. When she hung up, she looked panicked. Wrong number, she'd said quickly. Or the time Tommy asked about her watch. It was beautiful. Definitely real gold with tiny diamonds around the face. When David looked it up online later, he found similar ones that cost more than he made in 6 months. It was a gift, Lily had said when Tommy asked about it. From my grandmother. David wanted to believe her. He was trying to believe her. But the story kept getting more complicated. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. David was working late, trying to finish a big concrete job before the weather turned bad. He'd called to tell Lily and Tommy to go ahead and eat without him. When he got home around 9, he found Tommy in his pajamas looking upset. What's wrong, buddy? David asked. Lily had another bad dream, Tommy said. She was talking in her sleep again, but louder this time. She kept saying papa and non posso over and over. David felt his stomach drop. Non posso was Italian for I can't. He'd looked it up after hearing Lily mutter it before. Where is she now? In the bathroom. She's been in there for like an hour. David knocked gently on the bathroom door. Lily, you okay in there? Fine, came her voice, but it was clearly not fine. It was shaky and small. Can you open the door? Just so I know you're all right? After a long pause, the door opened. Lily's eyes were red from crying, and she looked younger than David had ever seen her. I'm okay, she said. Just tired. Tommy said you had a nightmare. Lily nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. They're getting worse. I keep dreaming about before. Before what? For a moment, David thought she might actually tell him the truth. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Before I was homeless, she said finally. David sat down on the couch and patted the spot next to him. Lily hesitated, then sat down, leaving space between them like she always did. Lily, David said gently, I need you to know that whatever happened to you before, whatever you're running from, you're safe here. But I also need to know if keeping you here is putting Tommy in any danger. Lily's head snapped up, her eyes wide. No, I would never. David, I would never do anything to hurt Tommy, or you. I believe you, David said. And he meant it. But someone's looking for you, aren't they? Lily was quiet for so long that David thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. My father is very powerful. He has people who work for him, people who can find anyone. I've been careful, but I had to use my real information at the hospital when Tommy was sick. David's blood went cold. 2 weeks ago, Tommy had come down with a bad fever. David had taken him to the emergency room, and Lily had insisted on coming along. She'd been so worried, pacing the waiting room like a caged animal. When the bills came back, though, they'd somehow been paid in full. David had assumed it was some kind of insurance mix-up. Lily, David said carefully, did you pay Tommy's hospital bill? She nodded miserably. I had to. I couldn't watch him suffer when I could help. How does a homeless teenager pay a $3,000 hospital bill? Lily looked at him with those big brown eyes, and David could see her trying to decide how much truth to tell him. I have access to some money, she said. Not much, and I can only use it in emergencies. But Tommy being sick was definitely an emergency. David rubbed his forehead. This was getting more complicated by the minute. What kind of money? It's hard to explain. Try me. Lily took a deep breath. My mother died when I was 13. She left me some money, but my father controls it. I only have access to one account, and only for medical emergencies or if I'm in real danger. And using that account means your father can track you. Eventually, yes. David felt like he was in over his head. Whatever family situation Lily had run away from, it involved serious money and people with the resources to track her down. The smart thing would be to call social services, let them handle it. But then he looked at Lily, really looked at her. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a scared, hungry kid sleeping in his hallway. Now she was part of their family. She helped Tommy with homework, made them incredible dinners, and had brought more laughter into their apartment than they'd heard since David's wife died. How long do we have? David asked. I don't know. Maybe a few days, maybe a few weeks. The account access was routed through several banks, but my father has very good people working for him. And when they find you? Lily's face went pale. He'll take me back, and I'll never be allowed to leave again. David thought about his own son, about how he'd feel if Tommy was taken away from him. Then he thought about Lily, who'd somehow become like a daughter to him in just 3 weeks. Well, he said finally, I guess we better make the most of whatever time we have left. Lily stared at him. You're not going to turn me in? Are you kidding? You're the best thing that's happened to this family in years. Besides, Tommy would never forgive me if I let them take you away. For the first time since he'd known her, Lily actually cried in front of him. Not the quiet, hidden tears he'd heard at night, but real sobs of relief and gratitude. David patted her shoulder awkwardly. He'd never been great at the emotional stuff. That had been his wife's department. It's going to be okay, he said, hoping he was right. We'll figure something out. What David didn't know was that Lily's real name was Elena Costello, and her father owned half the tech companies in Silicon Valley. What he didn't know was that there were already people asking questions at the hospital, people in expensive suits who didn't look like they took no for an answer. What he didn't know was that in 3 days, his quiet life was about to be turned completely upside down. The knock on the door came at exactly 7 in the morning, 3 days after Lily's confession. David was getting ready for work and Tommy was eating cereal while Lily packed his lunch. The knock was firm, professional, and somehow David knew immediately that their borrowed time was up. Lily froze like a deer in headlights, the sandwich she'd been making forgotten in her hands. "Lily?" David asked quietly. She nodded, her face going white. "That's them." The knock came again, more insistent this time. David looked through the peephole and saw 2 people in expensive suits, a man and a woman, both looking like they meant business. "Tommy, go to your room," David said. "But Dad, now." Tommy looked between his father and Lily, sensing the tension. He grabbed his backpack and disappeared down the hallway. David opened the door but left the chain lock on. "Can I help you?" The woman stepped forward. She was maybe 40, with perfect hair and the kind of clothes that cost more than David's car. "Mr. Rodriguez, my name is Victoria Chen. I represent the Costello family. We believe you have someone who belongs to us." David's heart was pounding, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm not sure what you mean." The man spoke up. He was big, probably used to intimidating people. "We know Elena Costello is here. We're here to take her home." "I don't know anyone by that name." Victoria sighed like this was all very tedious. "Mr. Rodriguez, we appreciate what you've done for Elena. Her father is grateful that you kept her safe. But it's time for her to come home now. And if she doesn't want to go, she's a minor," Victoria said coldly. "What she wants isn't really relevant." Behind him, David heard Lily take a shaky breath. When he turned around, she was standing in the doorway to the living room, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. "Hello, Elena," Victoria said, her voice softening slightly. "Your father's been very worried about you." "I'm not going back," Lily said, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Oh, sweetheart, yes you are." Victoria's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Your father is waiting for you at home." "This is my home," Lily said, louder this time. The big man stepped forward. "Elena, you've caused enough trouble. Time to stop playing games." That's when David stepped between them and Lily. "She said she's not going." Victoria looked at David like he was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. "Mr. Rodriguez, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Elena is the daughter of Lorenzo Costello. Perhaps you've heard of him?" David hadn't, but he wasn't about to admit that. "Elena has been reported as a runaway," Victoria continued. "Technically, you've been harboring a fugitive minor. That's a felony in this state." David felt his stomach drop, but he didn't move. "Then call the police. We'd rather handle this privately. For Elena's sake." "No." Lily stepped out from behind David. "No, I won't go back. You can't make me." Victoria's patience was clearly running out. "Elena, you're 17 years old. You don't get to make this decision." "Then call the police," Lily said, echoing David's words. "Let them decide." The big man and Victoria exchanged a look. David got the feeling they really didn't want to involve the police, which made him wonder what they were afraid of. "Elena," Victoria said, trying a different approach. "Your father misses you. He's willing to discuss the arrangements for your future. He understands you have concerns. He wants to sell me off like property," Lily said, her voice getting stronger. "To seal some business deal." "That's not—" "It is exactly that." Lily's eyes were flashing now. "Lorenzo Costello doesn't have a daughter. He has an asset. And I'm done being an asset." David stared at her. This was a different person from the scared, hungry girl he'd found 3 weeks ago. This Lily was fierce, angry, and clearly used to standing up for herself. "Who's Lorenzo Costello?" David asked. Victoria looked surprised. "You really don't know?" "Should I?" "Costello Industries," the big man said. "Tech company. Worth about $40 billion. David felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. $40 billion. That was more money than he could even imagine. "Lily," he said carefully, "is that true?" She nodded miserably. "My real name is Elena Costello. My father is Lorenzo Costello. And yes, he's worth more money than most small countries. And you've been sleeping on my couch. It's the first real home I've ever had." Victoria made an impatient noise. "This is all very touching, but Elena needs to come with us now." Her father has business associates flying in from Europe specifically to meet her. The business associates she's supposed to marry? David asked. Victoria's silence was answer enough. She's 17, David said, his anger building. 17. It's a perfectly respectable arrangement. It's trafficking, David said flatly. You're talking about trafficking a minor. The big man stepped forward again. Mr. Rodriguez, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. No, I think I understand it perfectly. David crossed his arms. A billionaire is trying to force his teenage daughter into an arranged marriage for business reasons. She ran away because she didn't want to be sold off. And now you want me to hand her over so he can do it anyway. It's not that simple. It sounds pretty simple to me. From down the hallway came Tommy's voice. Dad, what's going on? Everyone turned to see Tommy standing in the doorway, still in his pajamas. He looked confused and scared. It's okay, buddy, David said. Just some people who want to talk to Lily. Tommy looked at the strangers, then at Lily's pale face. Are they taking her away? They're trying to, David said. Tommy walked over and stood next to Lily, taking her hand. She doesn't want to go, so she shouldn't have to. Victoria looked down at the 9-year-old boy like he was speaking a foreign language. It's complicated, little boy. Adults make decisions for children. Lily's not a child, Tommy said stubbornly. She's my friend. And friends don't abandon friends. David felt a surge of pride in his son, and in that moment he made a decision that would change everything. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to leave my apartment. If Elena wants to contact her father, she will. If she doesn't, she won't. And if I see you around here again without a police officer and a court order, I'm calling the cops myself. Victoria's mask finally slipped, and David saw the real person underneath him, cold, calculating, and mean. Mr. Rodriguez, you have no idea who you're dealing with. A man who treats his daughter like property? Yeah, I think I do. Lorenzo Costello has resources you can't imagine. He can make your life very difficult. He can try. Victoria pulled out her phone. I'm calling him now. He'll want to speak with you directly. Tell him he knows where to find us, David said, and closed the door. Through the door he could hear Victoria talking rapidly on her phone. After a few minutes the voices faded away. David turned around to find Lily staring at him with tears in her eyes. David, she said, you don't understand what you just did. My father, he doesn't lose, ever. He'll come back with lawyers, maybe even police. He'll find ways to hurt you. Let him try. He could have you arrested. He could take Tommy away. He could... Lily. David put his hands on her shoulders. Look at me. In 3 weeks, you've become part of our family. Real family. And family doesn't abandon family no matter how much money the other guy has, but no buts. We're in this together now. Tommy squeezed Lily's hand. Yeah, we're a team. Lily looked at both of them, and David could see her trying to process the idea that someone would stand up to her billionaire father for her sake. He'll be back, she said finally. I know. With more people. Probably lawyers. I figured. David, I'm not worth this kind of trouble. David smiled at her. That's where you're wrong, kiddo. You're worth everything. What none of them knew was that at that very moment, Lorenzo Costello was boarding his private jet in California, furious and determined to collect his daughter personally. What they didn't know was that he was bringing a team of lawyers, a court order, and enough influence to make David's life very complicated indeed. But for now, in David's small apartment, a construction worker, his 9-year-old son, and a billionaire's daughter sat around a kitchen, table eating breakfast and planning how to fight the most powerful man any of them had ever encountered. Lorenzo Costello arrived like a thunderstorm. David was at work when it happened, trying to focus on mixing concrete while his phone buzzed with increasingly frantic texts from his neighbor. By the time he got home, his quiet street looked like a crime scene. Black SUVs lined the block. News vans had appeared from nowhere, and reporters were trying to interview anyone who would talk to them. His apartment building was surrounded. David pushed through the crowd of reporters, ignoring their shouted questions, and made it to his front door where a police officer was standing guard. Sir, you can't go in there right now, the officer said. That's my apartment. My son is in there. The officer checked his clipboard. David Rodriguez? That's me. You need to come with me. David's heart was pounding as he followed the officer upstairs. His apartment door was open and he could hear voices inside. Tommy's high and scared, and a man's voice speaking with the kind of authority that came from never being told no. When David walked into his living room, he saw Tommy sitting on the couch next to Lily, both of them looking terrified. Standing near the window was a man in his 50s, tall and elegant, wearing a suit that probably cost more than David's car. Even without being told, David knew this had to be Lorenzo Costello. There were other people too. More lawyers than David could count, another police officer, and a woman with a briefcase who looked like she ate small children for breakfast, Mr. Rodriguez. Lorenzo said, turning to face him. His voice had a slight accent, probably Italian. I'm Lorenzo Costello. I believe you've met my daughter. David looked at Lily, who was holding Tommy's hand so tight her knuckles were white. I've met Lily, yes. Her name is Elena. She told me to call her Lily. Lorenzo's jaw tightened slightly. Elena has always been creative with the truth, but regardless of what name she's given you, she's my daughter and she's coming home with me today. Is she? Yes. Lorenzo gestured to the woman with the briefcase. This is Judge Patricia Morrison. She signed a court order placing Elena in my custody immediately. David looked at the papers the judge handed him. They looked official, full of legal language he didn't understand, but the meaning was clear enough. This seems pretty fast for a court order, David said. Judge Morrison spoke up. Mr. Costello has presented compelling evidence that his daughter is in danger. The court agrees that she needs to be returned to her family immediately. What kind of danger? Lorenzo stepped forward. Mr. Rodriguez, I appreciate that you've tried to help Elena, but you don't understand the situation. My daughter is worth millions of dollars. There are people who would hurt her, kidnap her, or worse, just to get to me. She needs professional security. She seems pretty safe here. Safe? Lorenzo's voice rose slightly. She's been living with a stranger for weeks. She could have been murdered, assaulted, trafficked. Hey, David said sharply. Watch it. Lorenzo seemed to catch himself. I apologize. I'm sure you're a good man, but Elena belongs with her family. Does she want to go with you? Everyone in the room looked at Lily. She was staring at her hands, not speaking. Elena? Lorenzo's voice softened. Tell them you want to come home. Lily finally looked up, and David was shocked to see that all the fire had gone out of her. She looked defeated, exhausted. I want to stay here, she said quietly. You can't, Lorenzo said firmly. You're 17 years old. You don't get to make this decision. In 6 months, I'll be 18. 6 months is a long time. A lot can happen. David caught the threat in those words, and apparently so did Lily. Her shoulders sagged. Mr. Rodriguez, Judge Morrison said, the court order is clear. Elena Costello must be returned to her father's custody immediately. If you interfere, you'll be arrested for obstruction of justice. David felt helpless. He looked at Tommy, who was staring at him with wide, trusting eyes, expecting his dad to fix this somehow. He looked at Lily, who had given up fighting. Can I talk to her alone for a minute? David asked. Lorenzo started to object, but Judge Morrison nodded. 5 minutes. Everyone filed out of the apartment except David, Lily, and Tommy. As soon as the door closed, Lily started crying. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry I brought this down on you. I should have left weeks ago. Hey, David said, sitting down next to her. None of this is your fault. He's going to destroy you. That's what he does to people who get in his way. What do you mean? Lily wiped her eyes. The court order, the judge, the police, and he didn't get all that in one day through normal channels. He bought it. He owns people, David, important people. David felt a chill. Can he do that? You have no idea what he can do. By tomorrow, you'll probably be under investigation for something. Tax evasion maybe, or building code violations. Something that will cost you your job and your house and maybe even Tommy. David's blood went cold. He'd go after Tommy? Not directly. But he'll make your life so difficult that social services will decide Tommy's better off somewhere else. The room was quiet except for the sound of Lily crying. David thought about his son, about the life they'd built together after his wife died. He thought about his job, his apartment, everything they had. Then he looked at Lily, this girl who'd become like a daughter to him, and he made his choice. I don't care, he said. Lily looked up at him. What? I said I don't care. Let him come after me. Let him do his worst. David, you don't understand. No, you don't understand. David took her hands. 3 weeks ago, I was just getting by. Working, taking care of Tommy, trying not to think too much about how lonely we both were. Then you showed up and suddenly we were a family again. But I'm not giving that up. I don't care how much money your father has. I don't care what he threatens to do to me. You're staying right here. Tommy nodded vigorously. Yeah, we're not letting them take you. Lily looked at both of them like they were crazy. He'll destroy you. Maybe, David said. But at least we'll go down fighting. This is insane. I'm not worth— Stop, David said firmly. You are worth it. You're worth everything. There was a knock on the door. Their 5 minutes were up. When Lorenzo and his army of lawyers came back in, David was standing protectively in front of Lily and Tommy. Time to go. Elena, Lorenzo said. She's not going anywhere, David said. Judge Morrison stepped forward. Mr. Rodriguez, the court order can be appealed. Any appeal will take months, one of the lawyers said. And in the meantime, Elena comes with us. Then I guess we'll see you in court. Lorenzo studied David for a long moment. Mr. Rodriguez, you seem like a reasonable man. Let me make you an offer. I'm listening. $1 million. Cash. Today. All you have to do is step aside. The room went completely silent. David could hear his own heartbeat. You want to buy her from me? I want to compensate you for your trouble. David looked at the money Lorenzo was offering. $1 million would change his and Tommy's life forever. Tommy could go to any college he wanted. They could buy a house, a new car, maybe even take a vacation. All he had to do was walk away from Lily. No, David said. Lorenzo blinked. Excuse me? I said no. Mr. Rodriguez, perhaps you didn't hear me clearly. I'm offering you $1 million. I heard you fine. And the answer is still no. Lorenzo's mask of politeness finally slipped. You're making a very serious mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. Elena, Lorenzo said sharply, say goodbye to these people. Now. Lily stood up slowly. David could see her trying to be brave, but she was shaking. It's okay, she whispered to Tommy. I'll be okay. No, Tommy said stubbornly. You won't. You'll be sad all the time. Lily knelt down so she was eye level with Tommy. I want you to remember something, okay? These last few weeks have been the happiest of my whole life. That's because of you and your dad. Lily, promise me you'll take care of your dad, and promise me you'll be good and work hard in school and be the amazing kid I know you are. Tommy was crying now. I promise. But I want you to promise something too. What? Promise you won't give up. Promise you'll keep fighting. Lily looked at Tommy, then at David, then back at Tommy. Something changed in her face. You know what? She said, standing up. I do promise that. She turned to face her father. I'm not going with you. Elena, my name is Lily, and I'm not going anywhere. Lorenzo's face went dark. Officer, arrest this man for kidnapping. The police officer looked uncomfortable. Sir, if she doesn't want to go, she's a minor. She doesn't have a choice. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway. She does. Everyone turned to see a woman in a business suit walking into the apartment. She was maybe 60, with gray hair and the kind of confidence that came from winning a lot of fights. Who are you? Lorenzo demanded. Margaret Walsh, I'm a lawyer. She handed Lorenzo a set of papers. And this is an emergency petition for emancipation, filed on behalf of Elena Costello. Lorenzo stared at the papers. This is impossible. You can't. Actually, I can. Elena is 17, financially independent and clearly capable of making her own decisions. The petition argues that forcing her to return to an abusive home environment is not in her best interests. Abusive? Lorenzo's voice was dangerous. How dare you? Forced marriage is abuse, Mr. Costello, even when you call it a business arrangement. The room erupted in shouting. Lawyers were yelling at each other. Lorenzo was furious, and Judge Morrison was demanding to know who had filed the petition. In the middle of all the chaos, David leaned down to Lily. Did you call her? Lily smiled for the first time since her father had arrived. I told you I had access to emergency money. Margaret is the best family lawyer in the state. How did you even know to call her? I've been planning my escape for 2 years. I just never had anywhere safe to run to before. David grinned. You've been playing chess while your father's been playing checkers. Something like that. The shouting was getting louder. Lorenzo was threatening to have Margaret disbarred. Margaret was calmly explaining why the emancipation petition would probably succeed, and Judge Morrison was looking like she regretted getting involved in this mess. "Mr. Costello," Margaret said loudly, cutting through the noise, "your daughter has filed for legal emancipation. Until that petition is heard, she has the right to choose where she lives, and she chooses to stay here." "This is ridiculous," Lorenzo said. "She's 17 years old enough to make her own medical decisions, old enough to drive, old enough to have a job, old enough to choose where she wants to live. The court order was issued based on incomplete information. My client was not represented. That makes it invalid." Judge Morrison looked like she had a headache. "This is highly irregular." "So is trying to force a minor into an arranged marriage," Margaret said calmly. David watched the whole scene with amazement. 3 hours ago he'd thought they were beaten. Now Lily had pulled a lawyer out of nowhere and turned the whole thing upside down. "How long until the emancipation hearing?" David asked. 2 weeks, Margaret said. "Until then, Elena can stay wherever she chooses." Lorenzo looked at his daughter with something that might have been respect, or might have been fury. "You think you've won?" "I think I've bought myself some time," Lily said. 2 weeks, Elena, that's all you have. And then we'll see who really has the power here." Lorenzo and his army of lawyers and officials filed out of the apartment, leaving David, Tommy, Lily, and Margaret alone. "Well," Margaret said cheerfully, "that was fun. Is she really safe?" David asked. "For now. The emancipation petition is solid. Elena's been financially independent through her trust fund. She's clearly intelligent and capable, and forcing her into an arranged marriage is definitely not in her best interests. And in 2 weeks?" Margaret's smile faded slightly. "In 2 weeks we find out how much justice money can buy." The 2 weeks that followed were like living in a pressure cooker. David's life became a circus. Reporters camped outside his apartment building. His boss got calls from concerned citizens, questioning whether David should be working around heavy machinery. The health department suddenly decided to inspect his building for code violations. His bank called to inform him that his accounts were being audited for suspicious activity. Lorenzo Costello was making good on his threats. But something unexpected was happening too. The story had captured people's attention in a way nobody had predicted. Social media exploded with support for Lily. "Let Lily Choose" started trending. People shared their own stories about escaping controlling families. Strangers sent money to help with legal fees. "Look at this," Tommy said, showing David his tablet. "Someone made a song about Lily. It has like 1 million views." David watched the video, a young woman with a guitar singing about having the courage to choose your own family. The comments were full of people cheering Lily on. "People think you're a hero," David told Lily as she made dinner. Lily stirred the pasta sauce, not looking convinced. "They don't know my father. He's not going to give up just because some people on the internet are rooting for me." She was right to be worried. Margaret had been working around the clock. But Lorenzo's lawyers were fighting the emancipation petition on every possible front. They argued that Lily was mentally unstable, that David had manipulated her, that she didn't understand the consequences of her choices. The night before the hearing, David found Lily sitting on the fire escape, staring out at the city lights. "Nervous?" he asked, climbing out to sit next to her. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if I lose? What if the judge decides I have to go back? Then we'll figure out something else." "David, there is no something else. If I lose tomorrow, my father will make sure I never see you or Tommy again. He'll probably send me to boarding school in Switzerland or something." David was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. What was it like before you ran away?" Lily leaned back against the building. "Lonely, really, really lonely. I had tutors instead of teachers, bodyguards instead of friends. I lived in this huge house, but I couldn't leave without permission. I couldn't even order pizza without someone approving it first." "What about your mom?" "She died when I was 13, cancer. After that, my father got even more controlling. He said the world was dangerous, that people would try to hurt me to get to him. Maybe he was right, but," she shrugged, "I'd rather take the risk and actually live than be safe and miserable." "And the arranged marriage thing?" Lily's face darkened. "Antonio Benedetti. He's 42 years old and his family owns shipping companies all over Europe. My father says it's a good business partnership." She made a disgusted face. "I met him once. He talked to my father the whole time like I wasn't even there. When you turn 18, can't you just leave? That's only 6 months away. But my father's been moving fast to make sure that doesn't happen. The marriage contract was supposed to be signed next month. David felt sick thinking about it. Lily, no matter what happens tomorrow, you know Tommy and I will always consider you family, right? Lily smiled, but her eyes were sad. I know, that's what makes this so hard. I finally found a real family and now I might lose it. The hearing the next morning was standing room only. The courtroom was packed with reporters, lawyers, and curious spectators. David sat in the front row with Tommy, who had insisted on coming even though David wasn't sure it was appropriate. I want to be there for Lily, Tommy had said, and David couldn't argue with that. Lorenzo sat on the other side of the courtroom with his legal team. He kept looking at Lily with an expression David couldn't read: hurt, anger, maybe even a little pride. Judge Harrison was a woman in her 60s who looked like she'd seen everything. She listened patiently as both sides presented their arguments. Lorenzo's lawyers painted Lily as a confused, manipulated teenager who didn't understand the consequences of her actions. They brought in a psychologist who testified that adolescents weren't capable of making major life decisions. They argued that David had taken advantage of a vulnerable minor. Margaret fought back hard. She brought in testimony from Lily's former tutors about how mature and intelligent she was. She presented evidence of the arranged marriage contract, arguing that it constituted abuse. She called character witnesses who testified to David's integrity. But the moment that changed everything came when Judge Harrison asked to speak to Lily directly. Miss Costello, the judge said, I want you to understand what emancipation means. If I grant this petition, you'll be legally responsible for yourself. No one will be required to take care of you. You'll be on your own. Do you understand that? Yes, Your Honor. And you believe you're ready for that responsibility? Lily stood up straighter. I've been taking care of myself for months, Your Honor. I've been managing my own finances, making my own decisions, even helping to take care of others. I think I've proven I can handle the responsibility. What about your education? I plan to finish high school and go to college. I want to study law so I can help other young people in situations like mine. Judge Harrison nodded. And if I don't grant emancipation? If I order you to return to your father's custody? Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then I'll comply with the court's order, Your Honor. But I'll run away again the first chance I get. And next time I won't be as lucky as I was when I found David and Tommy. The judge turned to Lorenzo. Mr. Costello, do you have anything you'd like to say? Lorenzo stood up. For the first time since David had met him, he looked uncertain. Your Honor, Lorenzo said, Elena is my only child. When her mother died, I promised I would protect her from everything. Maybe I went too far. Maybe I tried too hard to keep her safe. He looked at Lily, and David saw something break in his face. But sitting here today listening to her speak, I realized that the thing I was trying to protect her from was growing up. And she's going to do that whether I like it or not. The courtroom was completely silent. Elena, Lorenzo said, speaking directly to his daughter, I love you. I've always loved you. But I think I forgot that love means wanting someone to be happy, even if their happiness doesn't look like what you planned for them. Lily's eyes filled with tears. If the court grants your emancipation, Lorenzo continued, I want you to know that you'll always have a home with me, not as my possession, not as part of a business deal, but as my daughter, when you're ready. Judge Harrison called a recess to consider her decision. David, Tommy, and Lily waited in the hallway, barely speaking. The tension was unbearable. When they were called back into the courtroom, Judge Harrison looked tired but determined. This case has forced me to consider some difficult questions about the rights of minors and the responsibilities of parents, she began. After reviewing all the evidence and testimony, I'm prepared to make my ruling. David held his breath. Miss Costello, you are clearly an intelligent, capable young woman who has demonstrated remarkable maturity. However, emancipation is a serious legal step that shouldn't be taken lightly. David's heart sank. It sounded like she was about to deny the petition. That said, Judge Harrison continued, the evidence suggests that returning you to your father's unrestricted custody would not be in your best interests. Therefore, I'm granting limited emancipation. The courtroom erupted. David wasn't sure what limited emancipation meant. But Lily was crying and Margaret was smiling, so he figured it was good news. Miss Costello, the judge said over the noise, You will have the right to choose where you live and with whom. You will have control over your education and medical decisions. However, you will not have access to your full inheritance until you turn 18, and any major financial decisions must be approved by a court-appointed guardian. Who's the guardian? Lily asked. Judge Harrison smiled. Mr. Rodriguez has agreed to serve in that capacity, if you approve. David stared at the judge. I what now? Margaret leaned over. I may have volunteered you for something. Hope you don't mind. David looked at Lily, who was beaming at him. You want me to be your legal guardian? If you'll do it, Lily said. I can't think of anyone I'd trust more. But I don't know anything about being a guardian. You've been doing fine so far, Judge Harrison said dryly. 6 months later, David was still trying to figure out how his life had changed so completely. Lily had enrolled in the local high school, where she was valedictorian track despite having missed months of classes. She was already getting acceptance letters from colleges, full scholarships based on both her academic record and her very public story. Lorenzo visited once a month. The first few visits had been awkward, but gradually father and daughter were learning how to have a relationship based on love instead of control. He'd also quietly established a scholarship fund for disadvantaged kids, managed through Margaret's law firm. You know what's funny? Lily said one evening as they sat around the dinner table. David, Tommy, and Lily, the family that somehow made perfect sense. I spent 17 years in a mansion feeling homeless, and I've spent 6 months in this tiny apartment feeling like I'm finally home. Tommy grinned. That's because home isn't about how big your house is. It's about who lives there with you. David looked around the table at his family, his son, his legally adopted daughter, and the life they'd built together out of kindness and stubbornness and love. You know what? He said. I think Tommy's right. Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy. Inside David's small apartment, a construction worker, his son, and a former billionaire heiress sat around a second-hand table, planning their future together and proving that sometimes the best families are the ones you choose for yourself.